Rome, Olympic Stadium, July 1987. The Italian summer air hung heavy with anticipation, clinging to the skin of 80,000 souls packed shoulder to shoulder in the ancient city's massive arena. Twilight painted the sky in brushstrokes of amber and violet, the fading light catching on camera lenses, jewelry, and expectant faces turned toward the mammoth stage. The Who's That Girl World Tour had been Madonna's most ambitious production to date, a spectacular fusion of music, dance, and theatrical provocation that had ignited controversy and adoration in equal measure across Europe. Tonight marked her third and final show in Rome, and the electricity of the crowd seemed to charge the very molecules of the humid Mediterranean air. Whispers rippled through the stadium like wind through tall grass, rumors that had been circulating since morning. Michael Jackson was in Rome. Some swore they'd spotted him at the Hassler Hotel. Others claimed he'd been seen touring the Vatican. Speculation about whether the King of Pop might make an appearance at the Queen of Pop's show had dominated fan conversations, though most dismissed it as wishful thinking. The two reigning monarchs of music occupied separate kingdoms, their paths rarely crossing except at industry events where their interactions were scrutinized with near-religious fervor. Their artistic approaches couldn't have been more different. Madonna embracing controversy and sexuality, pushing boundaries with calculated provocation. Michael cultivating an otherworldly persona that seemed to exist outside normal human parameters, his talent so extraordinary it appeared supernatural. Yet both had ascended to a rarefied level of fame that few humans in history had experienced, creating an invisible bond between them, the shared isolation of those who live at the pinnacle. As the stadium lights dimmed, the crowd's murmurs crystallized into a unified roar. 80,000 voices raised in anticipation created a physical force, a wall of sound that seemed to press against the skin. Security guards at the front of the stage instinctively took a step backward, momentarily overwhelmed by the surge of energy. Those who had attended Madonna's previous shows knew what to expect, yet the electricity of anticipation remained undiminished. The opening chords struck, and Madonna materialized center stage in a halo of white light, the embodiment of calculated spectacle. Her blonde hair gleamed like a beacon, her costume, a mix of lingerie, religious imagery, and street fashion, designed to provoke and captivate. The crowd erupted, thousands of flashbulbs creating a constellation of light throughout the stadium. Her dancers moved around her with military precision, every gesture choreographed to frame their central star. 3 songs into the set, Madonna paused to address the audience. Her Italian was halting but earnest, earning appreciative cheers from the predominantly local crowd. She thanked them for their energy, complimented their city, made a playful remark about Italian men that sent ripples of laughter through the stadium. And then, her expression shifted subtly, a mischievous glint appearing in her eyes that those familiar with her performances recognized as the prelude to something unscripted. "You know," she said, switching to English, her voice amplified across the vast space, "I heard an interesting rumor today." The crowd quieted somewhat, leaning into her words. "They say the King of Pop is in Rome." A surge of excited murmurs swept through the audience. Madonna smiled, enjoying her command over the crowd's emotional current. "I'm not sure if he's here tonight," she continued, pacing across the stage with deliberate steps. "But if he is, well, I have some thoughts about his so-called kingdom." She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. The audience's reaction was mixed: nervous laughter, a few scattered cheers, an undercurrent of uncertainty. Madonna had built her reputation partly on her willingness to say the unexpected, to push against propriety and expectation. It was one of the qualities her fans adored, even as critics decried it as calculated controversy. "You know the difference between the Queen and the King?" she asked, her voice taking on a teasing quality. "The Queen isn't afraid to get her hands dirty. The Queen doesn't wear one glove because she's afraid to touch the real world." Scattered gasps mixed with uncertain laughter. Madonna was referencing Michael's iconic single glove, a fashion choice that had become as much a part of his identity as the moonwalk. The queen doesn't hide behind sunglasses and surgical masks, she continued, her voice carrying a performative edge that was part humor, part barb. The queen shows her face, speaks her mind. Maybe that's why they call me the queen of pop and him. Well, the former child star tried to hold onto his crown. A strange ripple moved through the crowd. Discomfort, excitement, the collective intake of breath that accompanies the recognition of a line being crossed. Madonna's dancers exchanged quick glances, their professionally neutral expressions betrayed by the momentary widening of eyes. This wasn't in the script. This was Madonna being Madonna. Unpredictable, provocative, perhaps testing the boundaries of her own power. Don't get me wrong, she added, softening her tone slightly. I respect any man who can wear those pants and hit those notes. But maybe it's time for the king to remember there's a queen in town. With a laugh that was deliberately theatrical, she signaled to her band, and they launched into her next song. The performance continued with its usual precision and energy, but something had shifted in the atmosphere of the stadium. An undercurrent of tension now ran beneath the surface excitement, a collective awareness that something unexpected had transpired. Conversations flickered between strangers who moments before had been united only by their fandom. Was it just Madonna being provocative, as usual? Was there genuine animosity behind the remarks? And most pressingly, was Michael actually here to hear them? In the VIP section, obscured from the main audience by strategic lighting and positioning, a slight figure sat motionless, surrounded by a small entourage of security personnel and assistants. Michael Jackson had indeed come to Rome, partly for a brief vacation between his own tour dates, and partly out of genuine curiosity to see Madonna's show. Her meteoric rise and the cultural phenomenon she had created intrigued him professionally, and he had slipped into the stadium quietly, hoping to observe without creating a distraction. Now, as Madonna's words hung in the air, those closest to him watched with concern. Michael's face, partially hidden behind his signature sunglasses despite the evening hour, revealed little. One of his managers leaned toward him, whispering something that was lost in the music. Michael shook his head slightly, the gesture barely perceptible. His focus remained on the stage, on the performance continuing as if the moment of mockery had never occurred. Madonna, unaware of his presence, drove her show forward with characteristic intensity. The minutes stretched into an hour, the concert building toward its climactic final segment. The audience, though still energized and responsive, carried with them the weight of Madonna's unexpected comments. Italian fans, many of whom idolized both Madonna and Michael with equal fervor, found themselves in the uncomfortable position of feeling like children caught between quarreling parents. Then, as Madonna finished a particularly energetic number and paused to catch her breath, something unexpected happened. A member of her production team appeared at the edge of the stage, gesturing urgently. The audience couldn't hear the exchange, but they could see Madonna's expression transform from post-performance exhilaration to surprise, then to something more complex, a mixture of disbelief, amusement, and perhaps a flicker of something that might have been concern. She turned back to the audience, her microphone gripped tightly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying a note of theatricality that didn't quite mask her genuine surprise. "It seems we have a special guest with us tonight." The crowd's reaction was immediate, a surge of energy that manifested as a physical wall of sound. Madonna raised her hand, calling for quiet, a rare moment where she seemed slightly less in control than usual. "I've just been informed that Michael Jackson is here." The stadium erupted again, louder this time. Camera flashes increased tenfold. People stood on their seats, craning to see the VIP section, trying to catch a glimpse of the legendary figure. Madonna waited for the noise to subside enough for her to be heard. "Well," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her lips, though her eyes remained inscrutable. "I guess the king heard the queen talking a little smack." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Madonna's expression shifted, becoming more calculating, the performer in her recognizing a moment of potential drama. "What do you say, Rome? Should we invite him to join us?" The response was deafening, a tidal wave of affirmation that seemed to physically shake the ancient stadium. Madonna nodded to someone offstage, then turned back to the audience. "Michael," she called, her voice carrying a challenge beneath its surface invitation. "Why don't you come up and show us what a king can do?" For several long moments, nothing happened. The crowd's energy hovered in a state of suspended animation, 80,000 people collectively holding their breath. Then, movement in the VIP section. Security personnel shifting, creating a pathway. A slender figure rising, hesitating briefly, then beginning to move toward the stage. The audience's reaction built like an approaching storm. Scattered cheers and exclamations giving way to a thunderous roar as Michael Jackson emerged from the shadows and walked, with his characteristic light step, toward the steps leading to the stage. He wore black pants, loafers, and a red shirt buttoned to the neck, simple compared to his usual stage attire. His signature sunglasses remained in place, his expression unreadable as he ascended to Madonna's domain. The two stood facing each other center stage, separated by perhaps 10 feet, the contrast between them striking and symbolic. Madonna, blonde and provocative in her elaborate costume. Michael, dark and contained in his comparative simplicity. For a moment, neither moved nor spoke. The audience watched, transfixed, as the two biggest pop stars on the planet regarded each other in a silence that somehow cut through the ambient noise of 80,000 spectators. Madonna was the first to move, taking a step forward and extending her hand with theatrical flair. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice carrying just enough irony to maintain her persona. Michael looked at her hand for what felt like an eternity, but was likely only seconds. Then, with a gesture of unexpected elegance, he removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that struck many in the front rows with their vulnerability and depth. Instead of taking Madonna's hand, he performed a subtle, graceful bow, the kind of gesture that belonged to an earlier era of courtly manners. "The pleasure is mine, Madonna," he said, his voice soft yet somehow carrying across the stadium through his microphone, which someone had managed to provide him. "Thank you for allowing me to experience your beautiful show." The formal courtesy of his response seemed to momentarily throw Madonna off balance. She had perhaps expected defensiveness, anger, or a matching barb. But Michael's gentle dignity created a different dynamic entirely, one she hadn't prepared for. The audience, sensing this subtle shift in power, watched in fascinated silence. Madonna recovered quickly, her performer's instinct kicking in. "Well," she said, her tone warming slightly, "since you're here, perhaps you'd like to share this stage with me? Show these good people what happens when royalty collides." It was a challenge wrapped in an invitation, carefully crafted to preserve her provocative image while extending an olive branch. Michael's response was unexpected. He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his often serious face, momentarily revealing the child performer he had once been, and glanced out at the audience. "I didn't come here to perform," he said, his voice gentle but clear. "I came as a fan, to watch and learn from another artist I respect." The simplicity and humility of this statement sent a ripple through the crowd. Madonna's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise, might have been respect. But, Michael continued, his voice taking on a warmer quality, "Since you've so graciously invited me, perhaps we could give them something to remember." Without waiting for her response, he turned to the audience. What happened next would be recounted in newspapers across Italy and eventually the world, described in countless fan letters, and eventually immortalized in music documentaries. Michael Jackson, addressing Madonna's audience with respect and warmth, began to speak about the power of music to transcend boundaries, to heal divisions, to create connections between people who might otherwise never understand each other. "We're different performers, Madonna and I," he said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "We express ourselves in different ways. But at the heart of what we do is the same thing, trying to bring joy, to make you feel something, to create moments you'll remember long after the music stops." As he spoke, the stadium fell into a hush, so complete it seemed impossible for a gathering of 80,000. Even the ambient city noise seemed to have faded, as if Rome itself was listening. Earlier tonight, Madonna made some comments about me, about my glove, my glasses, my way of presenting myself to the world. He paused, and the audience held its collective breath, uncertain where this was leading. Behind him, Madonna watched, her expression uncharacteristically open, revealing genuine curiosity about how he would address her mockery. She was right about some things, Michael continued, surprising everyone. I do hide sometimes. I do create barriers between myself and the world. When you've lived your entire life in the spotlight as I have, sometimes those barriers feel necessary. His honesty was disarming, lacking entirely the defensiveness or anger many might have expected. But Madonna does something I admire greatly. She challenges those barriers. She pushes against boundaries, makes us question why they exist in the first place. He turns slightly toward her, including her in his address rather than speaking about her in the third person. Your courage to be exactly who you are, to say what you think, to show what others hide, that's a different kind of strength than mine, but it's one I respect deeply. The crowd was utterly silent now, hanging on every word. Madonna's expression had transformed completely, the calculating performer replaced by something more genuine. A woman receiving unexpected validation from a peer she had just publicly mocked. So maybe the queen and king approach their kingdoms differently, Michael said, a gentle smile playing at his lips. But isn't that how it should be? What a boring world it would be if we all wore the same costume, sang the same notes, danced the same steps. With a grace that seemed almost choreographed, he removed his single glove, the iconic symbol Madonna had mocked, and held it out to her. Perhaps the queen would like to try the king's glove, to see how it feels to walk in his shoes for a moment. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, as we continue to bring you the most extraordinary moments from the lives of musical legends. The gesture was both literal and deeply symbolic, Michael offering Madonna a chance to understand his perspective rather than condemning her for mocking it. The audience recognized the significance immediately, a collective gasp rising from 80,000 throats. Madonna, master performer though she was, couldn't hide her genuine reaction. Something shifted in her expression, the calculated provocation giving way to authentic emotion. She stepped forward and, with uncharacteristic gentleness, took the glove from Michael's hand. For a moment, she simply held it, looking at the intricate beadwork, the craftsmanship that had gone into this piece of pop culture iconography. Then, with a nod that conveyed more respect than words could have expressed, she slipped it onto her right hand. The symbolism was lost on no one. The queen of pop wearing the king's signature accessory, a visual representation of understanding crossing the bridge between their different approaches to artistry. The audience erupted in a cheer so loud it seemed to shake the foundations of the ancient stadium. People were embracing strangers, many openly weeping at the unexpected display of mutual respect emerging from what had begun as mockery. Madonna raised the gloved hand in a gesture that acknowledged both the crowd and Michael. "Different kingdoms," she said into her microphone, her voice carrying an emotion rarely heard in her public persona, but maybe the same heart. It was perhaps the most genuine moment of her entire tour, a spontaneous recognition that transcended the carefully constructed image she presented to the world. Michael nodded, his expression reflecting a similar authenticity. Without further words, he stepped back, gesturing for Madonna to reclaim her stage, her show, her moment. But she shook her head, refusing to let him retreat so easily. "Music brings us together," she said, addressing both Michael and the audience. "It always has. Beyond the headlines, beyond the rivalries the press loves to create between artists, beyond the different ways we express ourselves, the music remains the core of why we do what we do." She turned to her band, called out a song title that was lost in the ambient noise of the crowd, then turned back to Michael. "Would you stay for one more song? Not to perform, just to be present, to share this moment with us." The request was genuine, lacking the challenging edge her previous invitation had carried. Michael considered for a moment, then nodded his agreement. What followed was one of the most surreal and beautiful moments in pop music history. Madonna performed not one of her provocative hits, but a stripped-down, emotionally raw version of La Isla Bonita, a song celebrating the beauty of another culture, another place. As she sang, Michael stood quietly to the side, occasionally swaying gently to the music, the gloved hand Madonna still wore catching the stage lights as she moved. The audience watched in a state of collective emotional transcendence, witnessing something they instinctively understood was rare and precious. A moment of genuine connection between two artists whose paths and approaches diverged in almost every way except their shared dedication to their craft. When the final notes faded, Madonna turned to Michael and, in a gesture that shocked many who knew her public persona, performed a small curtsy, a queen acknowledging a king, one royal to another. Michael responded with another formal bow, the kind of courtly gesture that seemed to belong to an earlier, more gracious era. Then, with no further words exchanged, he gently reclaimed his glove from Madonna's hand, the transfer a private moment between them though witnessed by thousands. With a final wave to the audience, who responded with a thunderous standing ovation, Michael Jackson descended the steps and disappeared back into the shadows of the VIP section, leaving Madonna to complete her show. The remainder of the concert unfolded in a changed atmosphere. Madonna performed with her usual technical precision and energy, but those close enough to see her face noted something different in her expression, a thoughtfulness, perhaps even a humility that hadn't been present before. The audience, too, remained in a state of emotional catharsis, the unexpected moment of reconciliation and mutual respect having touched something profound in their collective experience. As the final encore concluded and the house lights gradually rose, few people moved toward the exits. Instead, they remained in their places, talking excitedly with companions and strangers alike, trying to process what they had witnessed. Security guards reported later that the crowd's dispersal took nearly twice as long as usual, as if people were reluctant to leave the space where such a magical moment had occurred, afraid that stepping outside the stadium would break the spell of what they had experienced. Outside, as fans finally began to stream into the warm Roman night, street vendors were already selling hastily produced photographs of the moment. Madonna wearing Michael's glove, the two icons standing together on stage in an unexpected tableau of mutual respect. Journalists who had been present were dictating stories over payphones to editors around the world, struggling to capture in words the emotional impact of what had transpired. In her dressing room after the show, Madonna sat quietly before her mirror, her post-show routine momentarily forgotten. One of her dancers reported later that she seemed lost in thought, absently tracing the pattern of her own hand, as if still feeling the phantom presence of Michael's glove. When her manager entered with congratulations on the unexpected publicity coup, she waved him away with uncharacteristic impatience. "You don't understand," she said. "That wasn't about publicity. That was about—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to articulate exactly what it had been about. In the presidential suite of the Hassler Hotel, Michael Jackson stood at the window, looking out over the ancient city. The Eternal City, they called it, a place that had witnessed the rise and fall of emperors, popes, dictators, and now played host to a different kind of royalty. One of his entourage approached cautiously, asking if he wanted to issue a statement about what had happened at the concert, knowing that by morning it would be headlines around the world. Michael shook his head. "Some moments shouldn't be explained," he said softly. "Some moments should just be felt." The next day, Italian newspapers bore headlines describing the encounter. La Regina e il Re, Pace Musicale, The Queen and King, Musical Piece, read one. Madonna and Michael, When Mockery Becomes Respect, proclaimed another. But perhaps the most telling was a simple headline in Rome's oldest daily newspaper: 80,000 witnesses to a moment of grace. In the decades that followed, those who had been present that night would recount the story with a reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. They would describe not just what they saw and heard, but how it made them feel. the rare and precious sensation of witnessing something authentic and transformative in a context where everything is usually carefully choreographed and controlled. If you've enjoyed this glimpse into a legendary moment of music history, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary stories from the lives of musical icons. Years later, during an interview for a retrospective on her career, Madonna was asked about that night in Rome. Uncharacteristically, she hesitated before answering, as if still processing the experience even after so much time had passed. "There are moments in your career that become turning points," she finally said. "Not necessarily visible from the outside, but profound shifts in how you see yourself, your work, your place in the world. That night was one of those for me." She paused again, choosing her words carefully. "I went on stage as someone who thought strength meant never showing vulnerability. I left understanding that true strength might be something else entirely." In a museum dedicated to music history, a small display case contains a white sequined glove, not Michael Jackson's original, that remains in his estate's private collection, but an identical one created by the same designer. Beside it sits a handwritten note on Madonna's personal stationery, donated years after the Rome concert. "Different kingdoms," it reads, "same heart." Visitors to the museum often linger at this display, even those too young to remember either artist in their prime. There's something about the story it represents, about mockery transformed into understanding, about the bridge built between different approaches to artistry, about the rare and precious moments when public personas fall away to reveal human connection that continues to resonate across generations. And sometimes, among those visitors, are individuals who were present that night in Rome. They can be identified by the particular quality of their silence as they stand before the display, by the distant look in their eyes as they remember. They rarely speak to the strangers around them, but if asked what it was like to be there, their expressions change in a characteristic way. A softening, a slight misting of the eyes, a smile that conveys more than words ever could. "I was there," they say simply. "I saw it happen." And in that statement is contained all the wonder of having witnessed a moment when two different kinds of royalty found common ground, when mockery gave way to mutual respect, when 80,000 people cried together at an unexpected display of grace. A moment that transcended the music to touch something fundamentally human in everyone present. A moment that reminds us, even now, that beneath the costumes and controversies and carefully constructed personas, what endures is not the performance, but the truth behind it.